In the midst of an unfamiliar melody, I strolled through the grand doors of the Piedmont Road estate with a woman unknown to any in that gathering. Crystal chandeliers bathed the white-clothed tables in golden light. A 20-foot floral arch bore our names embroidered in script, Harrison and Camille, celebrating 20 years. My wife, radiant amidst a crowd of significance to her, stood near the champagne tower, laughing heartily in her expensive navy dress, pricier than my first car. As she spotted me, her smile transformed. It didn't fade, it intensified. "Look who's here," she announced, loud enough to make the string quartet momentarily halt. "Everyone behold, the guest of honor has deigned to attend his own anniversary party." Eyes turned, and I felt the collective gaze of 200 spectators settle upon me, then shift to my companion. At a standstill, Vanessa's delicate hand rested on my forearm, her composed countenance hiding the depth of her exertion. Evaluating her, much like appraising a competitor, was Camille, as her eyes scanned Vanessa from head to toe. A burst of laughter echoed, followed by Camille's raised glass and proclamation that I had longed to hear in front of an audience for 4 months. "Oh my God, everyone, Harrison brought his mistress to our anniversary party." The room erupted with genuine, carefree laughter, a product of 3 glasses of champagne and complete trust in one another. A voice rang out from near the bar, "20 years and he's still got it, Harrison." My law partner's wife snorted into her drink. Even my elderly mother, standing by the dessert table, hid her laughter behind a napkin. The room laughed, save for one man. He stood approximately 15 feet from Camille, donning a charcoal suit and clutching a half-filled tumbler of bourbon. 6'2" Brett Calloway, sporting a salt and pepper hairdo and an outdoor tan, seemed to lose color as if someone had abruptly turned off a faucet behind his neck. His gaze met Vanessa's, who returned it, while the ballroom began to realize, albeit gradually, that something amiss had happened in the joke's delivery. I allowed the laughter to subside naturally, resisting the urge to hasten its end. Over 2 decades of courtroom experience had instilled in me the value of silence as a tool, and most individuals find it challenging to tolerate such a pause. I waited until the only sound left echoing in that ballroom was the faint tinkling of a glass being put down. Then I directed a smile at my spouse, mirroring the one I typically bestow upon adversaries before presenting an unanticipated exhibit. "Sure, darling," I said casually, "let's go with that." Turning to the audience, still supported by Vanessa's grip on my arm, I introduced, "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to present Vanessa Calloway." I allowed the name to hang in the air. I observed Brett tightening his hold on his glass. Harrison Vance, age 44, has worked as a family law attorney in Atlanta, Georgia, for the past 17 years. His office is located on the 9th floor of a glass tower near Peachtree Road in Buckhead, overlooking neighborhoods where many of his clients' marriages crumbled silently. 6 months before a fateful party, he was someone else. As the night that party unfolded began to unravel after a brief moment of stillness, someone's fork struck a plate, and chaos ensued. Subscribe for more stories like this if you can relate to disregarding instincts, and consider the question, would you have acted as I did or left? Delve into the past 6 months of Harrison's life to understand the events that led to that evening. For years, I've faced countless individuals expressing a similar disbelief, that vacant expression, as they shared tales of sleepless nights, gym memberships acquired anew, and phones requiring password protection. My professional journey has been shaped around the design of deceit. I'm adept at deciphering credit card statements concealing hidden hotel rooms, understanding the tactics employed in contentious custody disputes, and comprehending the financial implications when a marriage disintegrates, a truth many refuse to acknowledge. Remarkably, for 4 months, I remained oblivious to the same unfolding in my own home. 2 decades ago, I wed Camille Foster in a modest church in Decatur, with approximately 80 attendees. She was 24 then, a budding real estate agent whose laugh echoed through rooms and ambitions that intimidated some. Yet her determination never daunted me. I admired her aspirations, appreciated her goals. 14 years ago, we purchased our first home together, a small 1920s bungalow in Virginia Highland, which had a sagging porch and required a space heater for Christmas due to a malfunctioning furnace. By the time I'm recounting this tale, we had long since left that bungalow, having moved into a spacious 5-bedroom colonial in Brookhaven. Camille established her own successful real estate brokerage, Foster and Associates, and garnered recognition for selling multi-million-dollar properties without disclosing prices to clients. Our daughter, Maya, aged 19, was enrolled as a sophomore at the University of Georgia in Athens, majoring in psychology, and often sent us memes at midnight. To onlookers, we appeared to be the enviable couple that other couples aspired to emulate. For 2 decades, individuals at gatherings would remark, 20 years, maintaining eye contact as if it held significance. Indeed, for the majority of those years, the claim remained accurate. We weren't flawless. We experienced periods of estrangement. When Maya was young and both of us were working grueling 80-hour weeks, our communication was sparse, limited to coordinating schedules. Yet we always managed to reconnect. That was our narrative. That was the tale I convinced myself of, right up until the spring. The first shift was subtle, so minor that I later found it amusing due to its textbook nature. Camille began taking client calls from the bathroom. In a marriage, you unintentionally establish a multitude of trivial habits. Previously, Camille would take phone calls in the kitchen, pacing back and forth across the hardwood while her phone was pressed between ear and shoulder as she jotted down notes on the reverse side of an envelope. That was simply who she was. In late February, as she began to frequently excuse herself with phrases like, "Sorry, dear, I have this to attend to, it's about the Whitfield closing," and retreating to our bedroom, closing the bathroom door behind her, I took notice. At first, I didn't read much into it. But then a new listing emerged. Camille had collaborated with developers on significant projects in the past, which was common in the business. However, that spring, she spoke more about one developer than any other. Brett Calloway of Calloway Development Group. He was renovating a row of townhouses near Chastain Park, upscale properties worth millions per unit. Remarkably, Camille had secured the exclusive listing for this project. "He's quite astute," she shared over dinner one evening. There was an unusual casualness in her tone when mentioning his name, suggesting she may have rehearsed saying it to sound less formal. Rose from humble beginnings and single-handedly built his entire company. Every Thursday, we were planning a walkthrough. I barely knew Brett Calloway, similar to the casual recognition of names in a bustling city like Atlanta, where a few hundred familiar faces appear at every gala. We'd crossed paths once or twice, about 2 years back at a charity event for the Atlanta History Center. He was tall with a firm handshake, married to an interior designer named Vanessa. I retained that detail because she had complimented my tie, which made me feel special enough to remember her name. For nearly a month and a half, Brett became a recurring topic during our dinner discussions. Brett felt the presentation required more theatricality. Brett proposed a rooftop event for the launch. Brett shared an ambitious plan for the lobby. I listened attentively, as is customary in a marriage, because that's what spousal conversations entail. You listen to their accounts of their day, even the parts that seem mundane, because it's their life and you cherish them. It took me several weeks to realize the frequency of client dinners increasing. Previously, Camille had organized client dinners. Work obligations included networking, forming connections, and sealing deals over a glass of wine at Bones or Aria. However, dinners with Brett began to stretch into the night. The time moved from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m., then don't worry about me. Later, there was the bracelet, a delicate gold cuff, subtly adorned with diamonds embedded in the metal, priceless due to its clientele. Camille wore it one evening in March, and when I remarked on it, she briefly displayed a guarded expression before replying, "Oh, I bought it myself." A reward from the Calloway Deals commission. She thought she deserved it. I accepted her explanation. That's the difficult part to admit, even now. I trusted her because why wouldn't I? Camille had purchased herself jewelry on previous occasions. She was diligent and earned a good income. In that instant, there was no cause for doubt other than her words. However, being a family law attorney for 17 years has its quirks. Your mind automatically files details without consent. It's like an involuntary reflex you can't switch off. A week later, I was reviewing our joint American Express statement to sort out some business expenses for my firm. Routine, Tuesday night chores at the kitchen table. And there was a charge from Sterling and Stone Jeweler on West Paces Ferry Road, totaling $4,200. It was dated the same week as her closing bonus. I stared at that figure for quite some time. Granted, $4,200 wasn't an unusual amount for us. We had the means to pay it, and Camille had separate accounts and funds. What made me uncomfortable was that she told me it was a purchase for herself. Yet the charge appeared on our joint card. Something about the numbers just didn't sit right in my gut. Subtle, unassuming. 4 seconds to talk myself out of suspicion, I tried. Desperately wanted to. I shut the laptop, had a glass of bourbon, and told myself it was mere paranoia. A career spent analyzing others' marital issues can make you see cracks where none exist. I convinced myself that Camille loved me 20 years, a daughter, a life together. Nearly believed it. The hint came from Maya, oblivious to her revelation. In April, she returned home for a long weekend, and we enjoyed coffee on the back porch, a picturesque Georgia spring morning with azaleas blooming in every yard. Casually, she mentioned that she had seen Mom's car near the scent. A seemingly innocuous remark, but it struck a chord. On Peachtree Road on a Thursday afternoon, Regis was there to pick up something from home prior to returning to school. Maya expressed she nearly greeted her, but was pressed for time due to a study group, opting instead to assume she was engrossed in work. Camille paid no attention, continuing to sip her coffee. "Property tour," she replied casually, adding the Callaway team often held their planning sessions at the St. Regis bar, finding it more convenient than the office. "Interesting," Maya responded, and that was the end of the exchange. The discussion shifted to midterms, but I sat there with my coffee growing cold in my hands, aware of something Maya wasn't. I knew that on that Thursday, due to Camille informing me she had a closing in Sandy Springs scheduled until 6 p.m. Sandy Springs is approximately 15 minutes from our house, in the opposite direction from the St. Regis, located centrally in Buckhead, a 25-minute drive with afternoon traffic. 2 stories, 2 locations, the same Thursday. That day, I acknowledged my suspicions were valid. I wish to share with you what transpired afterward, as it is likely the most astonishing part of this tale. Unlike what one might expect, I did not challenge her, pursue her, or inquire about anything. Instead, I returned to work on Monday. Seated at my desk, I dialed Desmond Avery's number. Desmond, aged 61, is a former Atlanta PD detective who spent 22 years patrolling Zone 2 before retiring and venturing into private investigations, primarily for lawyers like me. I have engaged his services on numerous occasions for various tasks, including surveillance, financial audits, the works. My trust in him is unwavering, even beyond what I would tell my own sibling. "Harrison," he responded upon answering. "What's the matter?" I replied. "It's not a case, it's about me." There was a brief silence on the line. I could make out his actions, a chair squeaking, him settling down as if realizing this wasn't an ordinary conversation. "All right," he murmured, his voice softening in a way I hadn't heard before. "Speak to me." I divulged the details of the bracelet, the frequent bathroom breaks, the St. Regis, the questionable Sandy Springs closing. After I finished speaking, Desmond fell silent for a moment. "Honesty is what you get from me always. Not just anyone does that, Harrison." That's not suspicion or paranoia. I've handled 100 of these cases, and it shapes up the same way each time. Do you want me to investigate? I stared out my office window, watching traffic inch along Peachtree Street. Thoughts of Maya, Camille's laughter, and 2 decades in Virginia Highland crossed my mind. "Yes," I replied, "go ahead and investigate." Desmond worked swiftly and silently. For the subsequent 3 weeks, Desmond compiled a dossier that, despite all my past experiences and my awareness of what I was seeking, still left me reeling. The relationship between Camille and Brett had been ongoing for 4 months. It appeared to have originated around the time the Callaway listing became available, which made everything crystal clear. On 11 occasions, they had met at the St. Regis Hotel. Desmond had evidence in the form of pictures, not explicit ones, but rather images of them entering and exiting the hotel at different times, a calculated routine suggesting their awareness of being observed. What proved to be the most crucial element of the entire file was something Desmond had uncovered without my request. Brett Callaway's matrimonial record indicates a 9-year marriage with Vanessa Callaway, the woman from the History Center fundraiser who praised your tie. Running an interior design firm in West Midtown, she specialized in upscale residential projects. Despite extensive investigation by Desmond, no signs of deception were found regarding Vanessa. Her credit cards showed no irregularities, and there were no indications of late-night activities on her part. By all accounts, Vanessa Callaway believed her marriage to a prosperous, busy, committed husband was blissful. I spent a considerable amount of time in my office contemplating this file. I thought about the numerous clients I've represented over the years, individuals who discovered their spouse's infidelity, feeling betrayed not only personally, but also for the stranger on the other end, the one deceived just as fully as they were. Unaware to Vanessa Callaway, her husband had spent 4 months at the St. Regis with your wife. Camille had constructed an entire separate life within our marriage, never once pondering the existence of another woman concealing the same deception on the other side. It was then that the notion began to take shape. Not solely revenge, but more so justice, ensuring everyone involved learned the truth simultaneously, rather than me shouldering it alone for months while my spouse boasted about our good fortune at social gatherings. Our 20th anniversary party was scheduled 11 days from then. Now I must reveal something about myself that I'm not entirely proud of. I am exceptionally skilled at constructing a case. Instead of confronting Camille or Brett on a Tuesday morning, I phoned Vanessa Calloway's design studio and arranged a consultation, using my own name, for a genuine project, secretly planned as a surprise renovation. I shared with her that I was remodeling our house, a project intended for our anniversary celebration as a present for my wife. Truthfully, I yearned to renovate the back sunroom. However, I also harbored a desire to meet Vanessa Calloway and discern her character. What I uncovered was someone I instantly admired, making matters all the more complex. Vanessa exuded warmth, humor, and intellect. She strolled through our sunroom with a tape measure and a notebook, and within mere minutes, she had envisioned a design that surpassed anything I could have conceptualized in a year. She spoke about her work with genuine enthusiasm. At one instance, she casually mentioned Brett, my husband, expressing a fondness that suggested she wasn't hesitant or protective. In my own sunroom, I conversed casually with this woman, aware of a secret about her marriage she remained unaware of. The realization made me queasy, truly so. Despite my fury towards Camille, despite wishing Brett Calloway to share my sentiments, Vanessa was blameless. She stood on the brink of significant hurt not self-inflicted but seemingly inevitable, and I, powerless, could offer no shield from it. The question that loomed was whether she'd eventually learn this secret from an online stranger or someone who genuinely cared for her well-being. Hence, at the conclusion of our consultation, as she gathered her samples and we stood by the front door, I inquired if she had a few extra moments. I disclosed that I needed to share something with her, assured her it was unrelated to the sunroom, and expressed my sincere regret for being the one to deliver this news. For the majority of our discussion that day, I'll leave out the details as it wasn't my story to share, and some matters are best left untold. However, what transpired is that Vanessa Calloway remained at my kitchen island for nearly 2 hours. I presented her with Desmond's records. That afternoon in May in Brookhaven, Georgia, I witnessed a marriage disintegrate, shattering into fragments over a granite countertop. When she had finished crying, and she wept profusely, all I could do was sit beside her, offering comfort as one does in such moments. Eventually, she looked at me with heavy eyes and asked the question that mattered most. What is your intention? I disclosed our upcoming gathering, a soiree to which 200 guests would be invited. I expressed my desire for them to learn about it simultaneously, in front of everyone, mirroring our own discovery, albeit without the privacy or gentleness of a kitchen setting. They constructed this secretive realm, I said, and I long for it to be exposed. Vanessa was silent for an extended period before replying. She wiped her tears, sat upright, and stated, "I wish to be present when it unfolds." The subsequent 11 days were the most peculiar in my life. I returned home each evening to a spouse oblivious to the fact that her entire realm was on the verge of collapsing. Camille discussed seating arrangements. She displayed fabric samples for centerpieces. She rehearsed audibly a small anniversary toast she intended to deliver, mentioning 20 years and still thriving. And I stood in our kitchen, observing her practice with a glass of wine in hand. My thoughts wandered to Desmond's file tucked away in my office. 11 pictures of the St. Regis, a marriage license bearing Vanessa Calloway's name. I remained silent, not due to weakness or fear, but because I am a family law attorney. And through countless cases, I have come to understand that the version of events one can validate is the sole version that holds weight. I desired Camille to stride into that gathering just as self-assured as she'd been for the previous 4 months. I required Brett Calloway to remain oblivious that Vanessa was included on the guest list. I sought to keep everyone in that room balanced, right up until the floor gave way. So I smiled. I aided in selecting wine. I complimented Camille on her choice of centerpieces. And 3 days prior to the event, I phoned Vanessa and posed one final question. Would she accompany me as my date? Not secretly or unexpectedly revealed at the last moment. Instead, I wanted her to enter with me, by my side, visible to everyone including her husband from the initial instant. I desired Brett to spend the entire cocktail hour questioning whether this was a coincidence or a dreadful scenario, or perhaps both. I aimed for Camille to spot a stranger on my arm and respond precisely as I anticipated, because I knew my wife, even following all that had transpired. Knowing Camille would respond defensively if she saw an unknown woman with me at our anniversary gathering, where her reputation mattered, I anticipated her tactics. She'd counterattack with boisterous humor to distract and take control of the situation before I could utter a word. She'd crack a joke, but it had to be directed appropriately. And that leads us back to the heart of the matter. The quartet, the chandeliers, the floral arch bearing our names, and my wife raising a glass of champagne to toast to 200 people. Little did they know, she was introducing her mistress at our 20th anniversary party. Upon hearing those 5 words, "Meet your lover's wife," I'd like to recount the varied responses that ensued in the room, for it resembled a carefully orchestrated demolition. You're unsure which event unfolds first. Brett Calloway was the initial mover. He placed his glass on a passing waiter's tray, causing it to wobble precariously. Approaching Vanessa, he seemed ready to touch her arm, following what appeared to be 2 decades of habit when one's wife is distressed. However, Vanessa retreated from him. Though only a single step in the sudden silence of the room, it carried the weight of a loud announcement. "Don't," she said firmly. Her tone was more composed than she likely anticipated. "Under no circumstances should you touch me at this moment." The smile on Camille's face remained fixed, but I witnessed it crumble in real time. Her gaze shifted from Vanessa to Brett and then to me, swiftly calculating, mirroring the mental arithmetic I had done weeks ago around our kitchen table, except she was performing this calculation in front of 200 people without any prior notice. "Harrison," she uttered, and her voice softened, contracting into a low and tense whisper. "What is this? What is happening?" I retorted. "You explain it." "You've been to the St. Regis 11 times since February, and given our current celebration of this truthful marriage, I thought it would be suitable for everyone to get acquainted." I nodded towards the floral arch bearing our names. However, my mother whispered quietly, "Oh, Harrison," from somewhere behind me. Camille's face drained of color, a stark contrast reminiscent of someone about to faint. "That's not, Harrison. That is not what— 11 times, Camille." I maintained a composed tone, having delivered closing arguments in the presence of judges, juries, and adversaries eager to dismantle me. Yet nothing had prepared me for the challenge of keeping my voice steady as I stood 6 feet from my spouse of 20 years in front of all our acquaintances. "I have evidence. I have records. You possess the sterling and stone bracelet receipt from the week you claimed to be in Sandy Springs until 6, which coincides with Maya spotting your car outside the St. Regis at 3. It appears you arranged for me to be trailed, you say?" Her voice trembled slightly as she said trailed, making it seem like that was the transgression, the crucial part. "I didn't merely have you followed," I replied. It wasn't a challenging task. Remarkably, Brett, though he failed to offer much credit, didn't attempt to refute this claim. Standing amidst 200 people, many of whom he conducted business with, he simply murmured, "Vanessa, I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry." "Don't," Vanessa repeated. She now faced him fully, and despite her teary eyes, her voice remained steady. "You don't get to apologize to me here. Brett, you can't turn this into an expression of your emotions here, not with everyone present, especially after everything that happened." You could see the recognition in the room, in the faces of people who were familiar with both of us, who had dealings with Calloway Development and attended dinners at the Calloways. Some of them knew, it seemed clear, but no one had informed me. No one responded to her, but I noticed a few faces among the crowd freeze, understanding that their silence was the response. "The rest of the party didn't continue as planned," she admitted. Indeed, within 10 minutes, the catering staff began packing away the dessert table, and the quartet was ordered to stop. The festive gathering intended for 200 people morphed into a scandal that Atlanta society would discuss for the next 2 years. Camille attempted, for a brief while, to recover the situation. She seized my arm, the same one Vanessa held merely 10 minutes prior, and growled, "We aren't performing this spectacle here, Harrison. We aren't displaying our strife before an audience. Comprehend this." Regarding that instant, it resonates profoundly within me as I often reflect upon it. For 2 decades, I was the one who discreetly mended issues, avoided public scenes, and held the belief shared by many that decorum dictated silence, that problems were dealt with in private, shielding the ones we cherish from humiliation, even when they didn't warrant such protection. Gazing at my spouse, I recalled 4 months of clandestine bathroom phone conversations. I thought about Maya casually discussing the scent. Regis over coffee, oblivious to the revelation she was delivering. I remembered Vanessa Calloway weeping into a dish towel at my kitchen island, tears triggered by a stranger unveiling images of her own marriage's collapse. "You initiated this public display first, Camille," I retorted. Ensured they understood everything. I delicately released her grip from my arm. Let me clarify that. Afterwards, I didn't raise my voice, never touched her, and avoided any physical confrontation. Moving towards where Vanessa stood alone, since Brett had vanished to the bar as if attempting to merge into the carpet, I inquired softly, "Would you like to depart?" She responded with a faint glimmer of a smile. Heavens, yes. And for the first time that night, a hint of joy graced her features. For the subsequent weeks, I performed my job, but this time, the client file bore my name. Camille vacated 3 days post the party, initially to her mother's residence in Sandy Springs, and later shifting into a rental condo close to Lenox. I sought divorce assistance from a coworker at my law firm, since it's the most detrimental choice a family attorney could make when representing oneself in a divorce case. The process, compared to Atlanta standards, moved swiftly, taking just 6 weeks from filing to a signed settlement agreement, a rapid pace for our sized marriage, almost resembling a land speed record. Camille didn't contest it. I believe she found some sort of relief in not having to continue performing. Maya reacted strongly, as any 19-year-old would, but she returned from Athens the weekend following the party, and we spoke on our back porch, the same location where she had previously mentioned the scent, Regis, without realizing the impact. I confessed everything, every detail, because I'd made a decision long ago not to let her grow up believing her mother was merely a victim of her father's harshness. She wept. She became angry at both of us, it seems fair to say, which I think was justified. By summer's end, she conversed with both her mother and me, according to her own pace and preferences, which was all I desired. Brett Calloway experienced the financial losses typical in such situations. The Atlanta development sector is tightly knit, and news spreads swiftly within it. In less than 2 months, 2 investors discreetly withdrew from a project adjacent to Ponce City Market, and by autumn, Calloway Development had amalgamated with a larger company where Brett, I'm informed, no longer holds the title above the door. Vanessa filed for divorce the week following the party. Surprisingly, she did so ahead of me. She didn't require 11 photographs or a financial record to confirm her suspicions. Her own observations were sufficient. Here lies an unexpected chapter in the story, one I almost omitted due to its seeming perfection. However, it transpired as truth, thus I recount it. Vanessa and I maintained contact. Initially, it was practical. During our peculiar situations, both experiencing divorces, there was a practical advantage in having someone to confide in who shared identical experiences, even the same legal representatives and quiet friends on group chats. We'd meet for coffee, discuss mediators, share a somber laugh over our shared realization of Atlanta's smallness. Interestingly enough, that sunroom renovation was completed. Vanessa's design firm finished it in the fall, and it turned out exquisitely. The room where we initially sat, unaware of what was about to transpire between us, is now my regular evening retreat. Contrary to popular belief, our romantic relationship did not blossom at the anniversary party. Rather, that's not the focus of this tale. Approximately a year has passed since then. Vanessa and I are cautiously dating, having learned the expensive lesson of trusting the wrong person. The fact that something genuine and meaningful emerged from one of our worst nights together is significant to me. Not by design, but because we both saw clearly for once, we found the truth offered more than we anticipated. Often I reflect on that night, the quartet, the chandeliers, the silence after I uttered those 5 words. I also reminisce about spending years in my office on the 9th floor, listening to stories of betrayal and assuring myself I was fortunate, that it wouldn't happen to me. However, being surrounded by 20 years, a daughter, and a worn-out porch in Virginia Highland didn't make me invulnerable. Nothing can guarantee safety for anyone. However, when the truth emerged, I was prepared with an appropriate response. I understood that those who shared the ruins with me deserved more than to be left in ignorance. Here's the narrative. But before we part ways, allow me to share my true thoughts as the creator of this channel. Stories like Harrison's resonate profoundly since many can relate to that subtle sensation deep within them, a feeling of unease when something doesn't seem right, which they often dismiss due to fear of being perceived differently. My candid advice? Trust that intuition. It may not necessitate drastic changes in your life, but don't let it slip away unacknowledged. Time has a knack for revealing truths. It always does. That concludes my thoughts. If this struck a chord with you, feel free to express yourself in the comments, and I look forward to connecting with you again soon.